What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be explaining the 5th cure for a lean purse in this mini-series on how to build wealth. Now, these lessons are all taken from a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, and in this series I'm going to be breaking down each one of the lessons and how you can apply it in your own life with the overarching goal of achieving financial freedom. So, getting right to it, we have now covered the first 4 cures for a lean purse, or rather for being broke, and they are: number 1, start thy purse to fattening; number 2, control thy expenditures; number 3, make thy gold multiply; number 4, guard thy treasure from loss; and today we are going to be breaking down number 5, make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. So, what is meant by this? Well, in its simplest form, and as Arcad later words it when he ends this lesson, own thy own home. Nowadays, depending on who you ask, this can actually be quite a controversial statement. While there are certainly a number of people who are still very firm believers in home ownership, specifically in places like the USA, the number of people who believe that renting is the better option is steadily growing. You see, we live in a very different time period to that of the period of Babylon, and as such, things are perhaps not as straightforward as maybe they used to be. See, there are 2 very important aspects to consider when discussing Arcad's 5th piece of advice. The first thing we need to address is cost. Now, in the book, Arcad reasons that instead of renting, a person should buy a small piece of land. They should then take out a loan and build their house on said land. Now, after they've done this, instead of paying monthly rent to the landlord, they should then just use that money that they would have paid for rent and pay back their loan. His reasoning is that whereas renting is a never-ending process, paying off the loan is not. And so once you have paid off the loan, you now own the house and no longer have to worry about monthly payments. Under these conditions, Arcad is correct in saying that over the long term, this will cost less than renting. Unfortunately, though, it is not quite as simple as that, due mainly to the fact that the world that we live in is drastically different from the world that Arcad lived in. Firstly, there are countless more costs involved in owning a home today that perhaps were not as common in Arcad's time. In addition to this, people tend to move houses a lot more than perhaps they would have in Arcad's time, and many of the extra costs that we have today are directly linked to moving houses. As such, when compared with renting over the same period, home ownership doesn't necessarily come out on top in terms of costs, especially if the person who rented took that money they saved in upfront costs and invested it wisely over that time period. So if we took an average of the situations involving renting and buying over the same time period, we may actually find that they come out pretty similar in costs over the long term. However, if you recall, I said there were 2 aspects to this issue, and the second one is very important. Arcad teaches that a crucial benefit to home ownership is the fact that you can take pride in it. It will provide you with a confidence and stability and security that you wouldn't necessarily have whilst renting. This pride will also likely mean that you take better care of your house, and it won't just be a house, but a home. A place for your children to grow and make memories, for you and your spouse to cultivate the garden and appreciate it much more than you would if you were just renting. And this, the psychological benefit of owning your own house, will provide you with an advantage that you would otherwise not have if you were just renting. But renting and home ownership aside for a moment, let's take a closer look at the wording of this 5th cure. Make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. Now, when Arcad taught this, he spoke specifically about owning a home, but there is actually a more fundamental lesson that we can derive from this. For starters, there is more than one way to make your dwelling a profitable investment. Instead of owning a home, you could rent a house and then sublet it, living in one part and renting out the other part to someone else. If you play your cards right, this could actually cover your entire rent, but even if it didn't, it would still significantly reduce your monthly expenses, and this would enable you to save and invest far more than you would have been able to if you weren't subletting. And now, even though you don't own the house, your dwelling has still become a profitable investment. In addition to this, we should also consider the possibility that profitable investment doesn't necessarily have to refer to money. It could also be referring to your relationships with your spouse or your children. For instance, whether you are renting or buying, If you live in a house that is too small, if it has no space for your children to play or your spouse to unwind, well, then there could be a tension that develops, strife between you and your spouse, and a distance between you and your children. Therefore, again, whether you rent or buy, if you were to find a home that reduced strife in the household, that provided a place for your relationships to thrive, I would be inclined to say that that too is a profitable investment. All that said, the debate is still wide open, and I'm sure many people will continue to rent instead of owning a home. But at the very least, I do urge you to consider Arkad's advice. After all, there is a reason it's been around for almost 100 years, and why even to this day, people still regard it as some of the best financial advice ever given. So that is the 5th cure for a lean purse. Make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. If you enjoyed this video, then please do go ahead and give it a like. Videos like this take a lot of time and effort, and so I would really appreciate it. And if you would like to see more content on making money, saving, investing, and building wealth, and if you would like to follow me on my journey from $0 to $1 million, well then do be sure to subscribe. I upload videos every Monday and Friday, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Number 4. Guard thy treasure from loss. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.